Welcome to N.S.Harsha, Charming Journey. N.S.Harsha was born in 1969 in Mysuru, the ancient capital of southern India, where he lives and works. Along with India's rapid economic growth and urbanization, contemporary art from the country continues to attract global attention. Harsha has participated in numerous international exhibitions, showing his work all over the world. In his art, Harsha has adopted a sincere approach to life in his immediate surroundings, while establishing his own unique viewpoint. His subjects include the traditional culture of southern India, the natural environment, and the everyday relationships between people and other living things. In this exhibition, we take a look back at the last 20 years of Harsha's career by focusing on his most important works since 1995. Are you ready? It's time to embark on N.S. Harsha's Charming Journey. This exhibition starts in the mid-90s, after Harsha had completed a postgraduate course and returned from Vadodara to his hometown of Mysuru. The Faculty of Fine Arts at Harsha's alma mater, Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda, is known for a progressive curriculum, which distanced itself from the British colonial model and emerged in the wake of Indian independence. Harsha, who studied the history and new trends of global contemporary art, established a small studio in Mysuru, where he began to search for his own artistic path. This room is a reproduction of Harsha's studio at that time, with almost exactly the same dimensions. Now, let's listen to an interview with Harsha himself.
The early 20s, I would say, during the college days, I was still in the early college days, and most of the works were looking at this idea of the other and self. Like, to define the self, or like to define what is mine, you have to understand what is not mine. Or, for example, if I was reading a lot about the world art situation, even the world history in the art context, and looking at Indian history or like South Indian history, and then what is my personal history. So this was an interesting situation to kind of compare different arts with my way of looking at the world and see how we differ, and at the same time how I kind of have a similarity. I think this sort of duality was the early stages. While I was looking at the world from so many different regions, I was also looking at what was immediate surroundings, like a lot of Rangoli drawings or local popular paintings and local arts was like parallelly interested me, while the whole world was interesting, but at the same time, where I was living in Mysore was also as interesting as the world.
Harsha's work, We Come, We Eat, We Sleep, inspired him to focus on portraying different kinds of human activities at the same time. Various stages of life, from birth to death, are depicted alongside everyday activities, such as movement, eating, and sleeping. While making reference to the use of repetition in traditional Indian sculpture, Harsha gives every single person in the painting a unique appearance. The artist devoted 2 years to We Eat, the middle section of this 3-part work, alone. In the early 90s, economic reform continued in India, and foreign investment became increasingly common in many different fields. The IT industry flourished in southern India, and since about 2000, there has been a noticeable effect on the region's agriculture. Around this time, Harsha began to employ various perspectives to articulate the effects of a globalized world and its relationship to places such as his hometown of Mysuru. In the Charming Nation series, a wide range of characters are linked in a narrative that transcends both time and space. The title of this work, Development, refers to a slogan favored by Indian political leaders in the 1990s. This symbolizes the fact that economic liberalization has brought an influx of global capital to India's farming areas, as do the highway lights in the background. These economic changes have led to remarkable advances in these previously undeveloped areas. In the process, however, original crops have been lost due to the introduction of non-native species by multinational corporations. This has in turn led to dramatic changes to both the rural landscape and people's dining tables. This is an example of how Harsha draws upon actual events from the local area as the background for the narratives in his works. Come Give Us a Speech is an epic work that might be seen as a comprehensive survey of N.S.Harsha's artistic practice up until this point. Over 2,000 people are depicted in the 6 panels that make up the work. A diverse array of people, including movie heroes, contemporary art figures, and regular people with various characteristics, can be found here. They are all sitting in the type of plastic chair that could be found anywhere in the world. Therefore, it is difficult to determine exactly where they are located. Incidentally, there is an elephant hidden somewhere in the picture. Can you find it? This ambitious work reflects Harsha's interest in the relationship between the parts and the whole, the individual and the group, and difference and repetition.
Come Give Us a Speech, I thought about it for about 3 years before even I painted. I think I was painting it in my mind first, but then it took about 6 months for me to paint this. Not that it was difficult, but it was almost like it should become a practice. When painting becomes a practice, it is not that you are making painting, but painting is also making you. So that sort of relationship happened with Come Give Us a Speech. So it was influencing my personality, my life, as the way when I was painting the large painting. The characters come from, everyday life, to mythology, to memory. So it was almost like a intention to download every possible figure I have in my mind. So that was the task in the Come Give Us a Speech. So once I finished, I looked at the painting and I really felt this sort of black clouds need to be coming on the surface of the painting. So I painted this black marks, and then I felt the painting is done.
This resource room contains materials related to Mysuru and India, and drawings and models that Harsha made in the process of producing his works. By looking at them, we can understand more about various contexts that provide a background to the artist's work.
It's hard for me to kind of explain about Mysore because I always feel I am Mysore and Mysore is me. And it's an interesting situation now. For the first time, I'm kind of keeping away from myself and speaking about Mysore. It's a small city like any other city in India, and it has an amazing amount of cultural history which interests me a lot. And there's a lot of cultural activities which is also very active historically as well as now. And it's kind of the city which has access to cosmopolitan large cities like Bangalore or Bombay, where you can visit, but at the same time it has an access to this grassroots level villages and deep down, sort of remote places, which interest me a lot. So I feel this middle ground, Mysore, gives me access to both end of nation. Is an interesting position to be as an artist. So I think that's the principal reason I live there, because I want access to both ends. And Mysore gives me that very, very nicely.
At every stage in the development of the world's civilizations, human beings have looked up at the sky. Harsha recounts how he often climbed up on the roof, lay down, and gazed up at the night sky as a university student. For him, this was an act of philosophical contemplation. Sky Gazers is an installation Harsha made for the Liverpool Biennial in 2010. Please join the people painted on the floor and try looking up at the ceiling. As you look up in the same direction with everyone else, you too become part of the starry sky. Where are you? Where is the world headed? Sky Gazers was made to inspire this type of philosophical meditation. This work consists of numerous foot-powered sewing machines. Though this type of sewing machine is now rare in Japan, it is still used on a daily basis in India. On top of the machines are pieces of cloth depicting the flags of the 193 countries that are members of the United Nations. Harsha believes that it is important to consider the meaning of the word nation in a country like India, which is made up of so many different languages, religions, and cultures. The fact that the sewing machines are foot-powered reflects the human energy and labor that went into making and operating the idea of a nation. The flags are based on pictures in a children's book, but because designs only appear on one side of the cloths, they suggest that the concept of nations is empty. Since the 2000s, Harsha has created floor paintings and murals based not only on Western and Indian paintings, but also paintings from Japan, China, and Italy. This is a means of exploring new possibilities in the medium. Nations also seems to question the essence of Harsha's own paintings, and the concept of the medium itself. In the late aughts, Harsha moved away from central narratives and motifs in his work, and began to consider what constitutes a painting. Based on compelling ideas that emerged from Harsha's observations of people's behavior, these works convey a more abstract, universal worldview. In terms of color and shape, the colorful brushstrokes that sometimes appear in these works are reminiscent of both Western abstract expressionism and traditional Asian painting. Traditional Southern Indian cuisine, consisting of rice and many types of spicy dishes on top of a banana leaf, is referred to as meals. Leftovers was originally conceived for a solo exhibition Harsha held in Japan in 2008. It grew out of the artist's interest in Japanese industrial history and handicrafts, which are in the process of disappearing. In conjunction with a food sample manufacturer, Harsha produced some meals that were intentionally made to look like leftovers. These culinary leftovers, cultural leftovers, and the footprints left on the mats can be interpreted in any number of ways. Harsha is well known for the children's workshops he conducts. He has a deep interest in how children absorb and develop knowledge. In other words, their potential. While spending time with children in his workshops, Harsha began thinking about biological bodies, the relationship between knowledge and science, and organisms that absorb knowledge. Pledge was inspired by the hundreds of children who engage in prayer every morning on Indian school grounds. The legend at the bottom of the picture reads, with a mouthful of prayers and a bag full of dreams, we will be in those spaces where you have never been. If we view the universe in the background as nothingness, it seems to absorb a great deal of knowledge and give rise to new values. This work, titled The Future, was made in a workshop held in conjunction with this exhibition. Elementary school-age children living in the Roppongi Hills area drew images of what they want to be when they grow up and their dreams for the future on adult shirts.
Dreaming bangle is like two bangles dreaming. I mean, here I kind of say two bangles is two minds. Me and Joan are two different minds who live in two different spaces. Like she lives in Australia and I live in India. So it was an interesting proposition to work together and make this room sort of a dreamy space of communication. When we have different communications, we have this very dreaming situations and dreaming spaces. So it all comes from that energy of communication and mutual, sort of speaking to each other. So even the form, what you see in the center with the chairs linked together, is a reflection of this communication of two people around this pillar. And special use of turmeric for me is a material of cleansing. It's a material which cures, which is used for medicinal purpose. And here it symbolically kind of sits in the center of two people having a conversation. And we can perhaps now listen to what Joan has to say about it.
Collaboration's very interesting. It's interesting to work with someone who was predominantly a two-dimensional worker and I'm predominantly a three-dimensional worker. That's not, in collaboration, that's really just a technicality. It's how different personalities and different imaginations, different ways of looking at the world, how they have this kind of synergistic energy that builds. And I've always felt since I first met Harsha that he and I had that. I've collaborated with quite a few people, mostly musicians, but others visual artists as well. And this, I think, is the one where, well, look, it's the most fun. And always when working with Harsha, you expect the unexpected, and that's incredibly stimulating for an artist. And of course, his imagination is really quite extraordinary, just like his work. So for me, I feel like I'm always learning from him. And we never go over the same ground. And that also is very important to me anyway. Not to bed down in a practice that's fixed in any way. And with Harsha, it's the closest I've come to that, what I consider the highest art form, which is improvisation. But he's also an extraordinarily grounded person. He's very grounded, and I respect him enormously.
Depicting both the smallest and the largest of worlds, Harsha incorporates his personal interests into his work while constantly maintaining a balance between the personal and the universal. At the heart of his work are relative concepts, such as the connection between Mysuru and the world, and the rapid growth of nations and the labors of individual people. His focus is also rooted in a fusion of micro and macro. Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam. Again birth, again death. The largest work in this exhibition is an epic creation. When viewed from a distance, it looks as if the work was made with a single stroke of a giant brush. When we look more closely, however, we find that it is actually made up of an infinite number of stars. The work escorts us into outer space, inspiring us to consider the universe as a whole, and the never-ending cycle of birth and death. Harsha's works often contain depictions of telescopes and microscopes together. In Seeker's Paradise, for example, a multitude of characters, businessmen, yoga practitioners, animals, and Hindu deities, are shown peering through telescopes and microscopes. These devices might be seen as metaphors for people's innate abilities and the development of our intellect and experiences in the course of living. The work also suggests an intersection between gazing out at the world through a telescope and peeping at small details through a microscope. In Harsha's recent paintings, he has depicted living creatures such as monkeys, cows, and birds, using the same approach employed to portray human beings. The works contain a complex mixture of elements from everyday life, social incidents, and well-known legends like the epic Hindu poem, the Ramayana. Mooing Here and Now employs a cow motif, an animal that is a central and respected part of Indian society. Harsha depicts a myriad of cows, including some that he saw at dairy farms in different parts of the world and in the town of Mysuru, as well as indigenous breeds, which are considered to be sacred in the Hindu tradition. The work interweaves a number of different narratives and anecdotes concerning cows and people. For example, there is a reference to the use of biotechnology to industrialize dairies, and a 2012 story about a wild elephant attacking people and cows in Mysuru. This concludes N.S.Harsha's Charming Journey, an exhibition that encourages us to consider the immense universe and the existence of every single person in the world. How will everyday life look after you leave the museum and return to the hustle and bustle of the city? Please return the audio guide at the designated area as you leave. The narrator for this guide has been Chris Wells. Thank you.